Hello, Temple of Aaron and everyone else who is randomly watching this video. I am so excited to be speaking today with Rabbi Jacob Blumenthal, who I've gotten to know over the last several years, who has a really big job he's going to tell you about in a moment. He doesn't know that I'm saying this, but I was so excited when they announced he would be the new CEO, first of the Rabbinical Assembly. We put our faith in our leaders to make good choices to hire and sometimes let go in certain cases. And this was, I think, unanimously such a broadly, widely accepted and excitement about this new hire. So without further ado, Rabbi, you want to tell us a little about your dual role now and how you came to be in this position?
Thanks a lot. It's so good to be here and to have a conversation with you. And greetings to everybody at Temple of Aaron, and I hope everybody's doing well and feeling healthy and doing okay in these crazy times. And I appreciate that it's given us the opportunity, among with many types of innovation, to actually make time for these kinds of conversations. I currently serve as the Chief Executive of the Rabbinical Assembly. The Rabbinical Assembly is a membership organization of about 1,600 rabbis all around the world affiliated with the conservative movement. Most of them have been ordained by one of our major seminaries, the Ziegler School in California, JTS in New York, the Schechter Institute's Rabbinical School in Jerusalem, as well as the Seminario in Buenos Aires. And we have a couple of other smaller schools as well. And like what I like to say about the Rabbinical Assembly is our job is to help every rabbi be their best self, both professionally and personally. So my job and the job of our staff and our lay leadership is to help make sure that every rabbi affiliated with our organization has the tools they need and the support that they need, the connection that they need to do a great job and to have a fulfilling rabbinate and life in general. Also recently, my portfolio is expanding, and as of this summer, I'll also be working as the chief executive for the United Synagogue, for USCJ. Its role is to support 550 congregations across North America, also affiliated with the conservative movement. And its similar mission, which is to help every congregation be its best self, do its best work, and to move into a space of being a 21st century congregation. So the two jobs are very complementary, and the two organizations are going to take that partnership to a new level, helping synagogue leadership and staff work together with their clergy to create a vibrant and outstanding movement. So that's in short what I do.
So big job, never been done before. And I want to talk about, I think it's a good segue to talk a little bit about what are some of the trends or advice you'd have for new rabbis walking into new synagogues, or not the synagogue being new and the rabbi necessarily being new? Like obviously there's going to be some new rabbis ordained very shortly, but synagogues who are having a new rabbi and have to get along and figure out how to mesh with their new synagogue, their new rabbi, making that relationship. Maybe what's some advice you'd give to these communities and these rabbis?
So look, so I'll answer that on two different levels. The first is, it's been a number of years since I did a transition. When I was ordained from rabbinical school, I actually then went back to my student pulpit, which was a startup congregation in Maryland. And I served there for 20 years. So it's been a long time since I've had a first year transition. Then all of a sudden this year, I'm in a new transition as well. So I'll just speak personally from my sense that what's been valuable to me is to come into a new space from a place of curiosity and learning. Every meeting that I'm having, especially if it's for the first time with somebody, my question to them is, what do you want to teach me? Like, what do I need to know? How can you help me understand what I'm starting? And so I've found that to be incredibly fruitful. People love to teach. I love to teach. People love to teach. They love to talk about what their interests are, their passions are, and what they're facing. And when you do that and you ask a lot of good questions, you form a relationship and you really get a great entree into the community. And I would say the same thing to communities, which is, I think I found throughout my rabbinate that my congregation was curious about who I am, what I think, what are my opinions, how do I back them up by other types of knowledge, And curiosity is what creates a real conversation and relationship. At the same time, one of the things that I've discovered this year as we've been in a sort of curiosity business is that normally we have always thought that mentoring and learning goes from people who are more experienced to people who are less experienced. And so rabbis who've been in the field a long time often serve as mentors to folks who are just starting. And one of the interesting things is because of the rate of change and the ways things that are changing in the world at large, and especially in the Jewish world, what we have discovered is that there's actually a lot that our newer colleagues can teach us as more experienced colleagues. One of the things we're asking ourselves is how can we create reverse mentoring? How can our colleagues who understand relationship building and a relational form of Judaism as opposed to a program-based type of Judaism, how can colleagues who understand modern technology and social media better, how can they help more experienced colleagues deploy those tools and understand them? Not come at it from a space of anxiety, but actually from the same space of excitement that I see in lots of our newer colleagues. So it's been a fascinating piece of learning, and one of the things we're going to try to figure out is how we can learn how to create mentoring in both directions.
That's beautiful. I think it makes a lot of sense right now, with what's going on and having to switch to Zoom and Facebook and all sorts of things. Are there any before the virus, and we'll get into that, are there any sort of trends you're noticing amongst synagogues that the conservative movement or conservative Jews should be, note or take care? Not to get ahead of the curve, but to make sure that we're staying on point.
So again, I think that the biggest piece that I've been learning a lot about, and the biggest reframing that I've had in my own rabbinate, has been around this idea of relational Judaism. It's not because it's new. We've always been about relationships. From day one. The minute you're in a pastoral role, it's about relationship. When you're in a teaching role, it's about relationship. When you are, when you're in a leadership role, it's about relationship. We've always known that, but we've always thought that actually the real, when somebody asks like, what makes a successful synagogue? They ask questions like, how many people come to a program, or how many people come to Shabbat morning, or how many people, do you have in leadership, or something like that, or how much money do you raise, or how many members do you have, as opposed to saying, what's the quality of the relationships that exist? What's the quality of the network among the people who are participating in your congregation's life? That's a totally different question. It's nothing to do with how successful a program is. A program isn't successful by how many members come or how many people participate. The program is successful based on the quality of change in the relationship of the people who are participating. Do they feel when they've left that they have a different understanding of some of the people who they've participated with? Do they feel more deeply connected to them? And from there is when a lot of other things happen. It's where we grow spiritually. It's where we can feel like we're ready to meet, the challenges that life puts in front of us. Relationships with people parallel our relationship with God. We're made in God's image. So when I have a close relationship with somebody like Rabbi Fine, that there is a piece of the divine that enters into that relationship and friendship. And so we can't disconnect the idea of relationship between ourselves and God from a relationship that we have with other people. And that's the business that we're in as synagogues. So we're learning a lot more about that. I'm grateful to live in a period where we've actually been able to articulate that. And now we need to start to figure out how we can help synagogues and their leadership and also clergy come to understand that, and understand that the central role that we play as spiritual leaders is actually also thinking about how we create institutions that do that.
Yeah, I love the branding, or the idea of we're in the curiosity business. We've always said relationship business, but it's not just relationships. People come to us because they're curious about structure in their lives, about community, about spirituality, a range of things. So I'm speaking of the curiosity business. I'm curious, and I've got some like fun questions too. This is sort of my thing. I break down formality very quickly. So want to ask you a few questions. They're quick answers. What's your go-to kosher restaurant? Can be anywhere.
Could be anywhere. I would say Burger's Bar in Jerusalem, one of my favorite places, and in New York, Le Marais. My wife is vegetarian. I happen to eat meat. I'm not judgmental in either space, actually. But I think in my ideal world, I would be vegetarian, but it's just not the space that I'm challenging myself in. And so therefore, when I'm out, I like to eat meat. So when I'm able to, so those are two of my favorite places.
Okay. How about something that's in your office that represents you or is meaningful to you, but it cannot be a Jewish book?
Cannot be a Jewish book. I'm looking around my office right now. I'm in my home office, of course, in Maryland. You know what? I'll tell you. It's a more serious answer, but I'm happy to share it, which is, I have a number of carvings like this, which are from and especially because today happens to be Yom HaShoah. So this carving is from my uncle, Emil, my father's brother, who had he had mental disabilities. He was born with some mental disabilities. And when it was time for the family to leave Germany right before the Holocaust, he was unable to leave with them. The family was concerned that they wouldn't be admitted to the United States if he came with them. So they had to leave him behind in Europe. And eventually he was deported to the camps. And perished in the Holocaust. So I have a number of these different items. Actually, different people in the family have different carvings, bowls, and these kinds of things. And I do look at them. I have them in each of my different spaces. And I look at them, and it is a reminder of the miracle of what it means to live Jewishly today. And there's a piece of me that really, together with the memory of my father, who was able to escape Germany and thank God, came and built a life in America. It reminds me a lot of what it means to be Jewish and to do the work that I do.
Okay, that was deeper than Limare.
But it's Yom HaShoah, so it's good to talk a little bit about these things.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, how about I'm assuming, like the world, you are either reading or watching TV or both. What are you either? Let's say if it's TV, you can nod your head yes. And what are you watching right now? And not at this moment, but
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So my guilty pleasure is I did watch Tiger King. So I've gotten through the 7 episodes. I did not get to the supplemental episode yet. I think it's just a reminder of the beauty of creation, that we're all made in God's image, but we are very different in the world.
Yes, we are all. Joe Exotic was not a member of a conservative synagogue, to my knowledge.
No.
That's outside of your own community that you've been a part of for a long time. What's a conservative synagogue that you've been to that you've really enjoyed your prayer experience? Basically a shout out to someone out there that you.
So, I'll answer in 2 different directions. So first of all, I had a wonderful experience at Temple Beth Am in Los Angeles with our colleague, Rabbi Adam Kligfeld, and Rabbi Hillary Charney and the whole team there. They do some beautiful things with music and spiritual experience that I just found it really changed a lot of what I think about. Another experience that's just beautiful is Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum and the Sion congregation in Jerusalem. Also just very different, but an amazing experience, reminder of what meaningful prayer can really look like when you move past sort of the rote recitation of prayer and also move into a space of kavanah and really deep, and seeking deep meaning and experience. The other thing I'm really enjoying, actually, these past few weeks, one of the gifts, first of all, not being a congregational rabbi and having Shabbat morning to be able to roam a little bit, and also having the ability to roam from your own desktop, is I've been attending virtual services in lots of different places. So I've been able to attend like at Park Avenue Synagogue in New York with Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove and Chazan Schwartz and that whole team, and it's been fascinating. It's totally different than the davening that I did in my small 300 household congregation. Just fascinating to see lots of different models.
Okay, last question on this in this segment. Okay, so let's say there's a Jewish ritual or holiday that sort of needs a boost, meaning either it's gotten stale within our movement, it's gotten stale in the Jewish world, and you've either seen it been done really well some in one place, but it's not being replicated others, or you just feel you don't have the answer, but you know that it needs some enthusiasm and injection of life.
So look, I have a whole list of those things. But I'll give you one example. I was at a leadership seminar and we were challenged to think about like what's one sort of symbol in Jewish life or some sort of ritual that, you know, if you could reinvent it, what would it be? And somebody said, well, what if we reinvented the mezuzah? And at first I was like, you know, you have that feeling sometimes when you're like thinking about like really deep change and you're like, you can't mess with my mezuzah. Like it's on the Shema side, it's on a cloth, right? You know, it's on a little scroll and like, it's gotta be kosher and, you know, but then we started to talk about it. We were like, well, what if we were to, you know, the idea of a mezuzah is that when you're passing from one space to the next space, you're thinking about God, you're thinking about your relationship with God, and you're thinking about the expectations that God and tradition have for you as you move, let's say, from your house out into the world, or from when you're out into the world back into your home and family. What are your responsibilities? How should one act, right? And by touching and giving a kiss, maybe it's about loving God, but it's also about what are my obligations? Like that's what it's doing. And, you know, we started to think about what if we wrote our own mezuzah? Like, what are the values? What are the things that we would want inside that mezuzah that we would want to kiss every time we were leaving our house to go out into the world or leaving the rest of the world to come back into our house? What kinds of stuff would we put in there about loving each other, about acting with respect, about, you know, just all of these different, like, what would that look like? And would that encourage us to actually give that mezuzah a kiss more often because we're thinking about, you know, the values that are encased inside, because they're no longer so abstract. They're actually really the message that we wrote to ourselves. It's like writing a letter to yourself. I was totally fascinated by that.
It's a really interesting idea. You know, I've always been pegged, and I'm happy to accept the title as a more traditional rabbi, but try to be innovative when we can be. You know, my fear about something like that, which maybe others feel, is that like, how much is and I think this is really the crux of a lot of conversations we have in the conservative movement. And there are sides. I don't know that we are all on the same side, all the same side for each debate, but that's part of the beauty of the rabbinate, is that how much is it our responsibility to keep the traditions that we hold? Meaning, if everyone was to do it, we started a nationwide conservative movement project where everyone's going to write their own mezuzah on every door, how much would we lose what the actual mezuzah is versus making something really meaningful in the moment? And the trade-off of like, not only the history, but then the future versus the present in our own experience. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like as a conservative movement, how do we balance those two things? Like the clear need, I feel it in my congregation, but I feel it all over the country. And speaking of Beth Am, I mean, I think they've done a great job of like presenting tefillah in that way, but how do we balance the thread of Jewish life that we have always felt, that's always been intertwined in us, and we want to maintain? I think all of the rabbis, or 98% of the conservative rabbis, want to maintain, versus the present needs of our congregants. And how does that fall with you and your sort of your ideology?
So I think in two directions. Number one is, you know, sometimes it can be both and. In other words, what I wouldn't advocate for is like saying, oh, well, we can take down that old kosher mezuzah and put this new one up, right? Like I was thinking about, the opportunity I really lost was with my own kids, right? Like, wouldn't it have been great to have done a project with them where they had the kosher mezuzah up on their door, which, by the way, we always hung at a height where they could actually see it and touch it, not like way up high, right?
Yeah.
And as they grew, we actually moved it up their doorpost. But also, like, why not have another one right below it? You know, like a little piece of paper that just has like 10 words or 5 words that reminded them about, you know, love, respect, care, you know, things like that. And they could look at both while they were going in and out of their room, right? So the first is both and. We can keep a lot of traditions and add to them. We don't always have to replace. So that's the first. The second is realizing that what makes us unique as a movement is that we're looking at a continuum. The thing that's scary about change is we're afraid that someday you're going to look back at something and say, what we do looks very different than what we did 200 years ago. But the fact is, we do that in Judaism all the time. We don't offer sacrifices anymore. We don't, right? You know, like if we're not biblical Jews, the first of
You
my
haven't been
problems,
to, you haven't
right?
been to Minnesota in a while.
Well, maybe you guys do have that special thing in the courtyard. No, could be. Barbecue is good, but you know, like just thinking about so you know, but at the same time, I think one of our goals is to always feel like there's some sense of continuity. So what we want to do is not make a complete break with anything that comes from the past. We want to build on that tradition and feel like there's always a connection to that tradition, even as we might move it one step forward into a space where it can create new meaning or opportunity. So we're not going to redesign an entire prayer experience necessarily, but we might use new technology to make it accessible if we can't be together physically, right? So, and we might need to change either temporarily or even permanently some of our ideas about what Shabbat looks like in order to make that happen, right? We did that with the tshuva about driving. I personally don't like to drive on Shabbat, but I do think that for the sake of people being able to come together and being in community, like that's really valuable. It's very important. And so there's a way that we can preserve the tradition of being together on Shabbat and many of the things that we do on a Shabbat evening or a Shabbat morning, even though there's another piece of tradition that we might need to change or leave behind in order to make that happen. And we have to also be able to be non-judgmental about our ability to allow people to experiment with those things and be able to create a Jewish experience that uses that tradition in a way that's meaningful for them.
All right. So last question. Obviously, we're doing these interviews, as you mentioned at the very beginning, during a time of, I would say, great angst. I don't want to say fear, and I don't want to say, I think there's confusion. There's all sorts of emotions going on. We're all sort of stuck at home or quarantined, or most of us. And the synagogues are having to adapt. Some are handling, I would say, that probably very well. And I also have, I haven't necessarily been doing that on Shabbat, but I have been doing that throughout the week and trying to see what others are presenting and various text change of what people are doing and asking people and people asking me, et cetera. So what are some of the things you've seen that maybe people could replicate? And also any advice you have to families and synagogues going through this right now from a Jewish lens?
So first of all, it's a reminder that our ability to adapt as human beings and as Jews is really quite remarkable. Like when we step back and we realize this environment is totally different than anything we ever expected to face, I think, at least most of us. But we have managed to create Shabbat. We've created Pesach, Passover. We've managed to We've managed to figure out how to be productive at work. We've managed how to figure out how to educate our children. Not 100%. It's not like it was, but just first of all, our ability to adapt. I think that there's a spiritual component to that we really need to like breathe in and absorb, even with all the other anxiety that we take. And so, I look around and I see, for example, just the relationship building work that congregations are doing. Calling, creating ways for people to call each other. It was a Rabbinical assembly. Reached out to every one of our colleagues, who are sort of in a high-risk group over the age of 65, 70. We had never done that before. We never took the time to ask people to sort of check in. There were people who, quite frankly, hadn't heard from us in a really long time. That was not rocket science. It just meant picking up the phone and giving a call.
Right.
So it's just interesting, the small things that we can do, along with the big steps like a live stream service or using Zoom for a daily minyan. There are just so many ways that we can make those changes.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this has been, I really appreciate it. I'm glad people, at least Temple of Aaron members who are watching this, get an opportunity to meet you virtually and see you. Hopefully over time we can have you visit our community, and of course, health and safety to everyone, to you and your family, and to everyone who's going through this. We are all in just a state of unknown. And hopefully we'll get more facts than fiction soon, and we can get through this together and create even a better world because of it.
I agree. I hope, thank you first of all for inviting me. It's been a great conversation. I'm sorry I'm not able to meet everybody in the community in person right now, but I will look forward to the opportunity, and just wishes for health and strength, patience, and many blessings, in this very complicated period. I do feel like we're going through it together. Even the folks I haven't met or seen, I know that our communities are standing together, creating a sort of solidarity, even in our separateness, and I just really appreciate it. So just wishing everybody lots of blessings.
Thank you.